Oh!
Here. Oh. Here. Drop it. Hey, look at the bushes. Behind you, stupid. No. What's up, actually? Oh, is this my spot?
Yeah, like that. Okay.
Okay. I look at the broom, or?
No, you just got to stand right here. People can have something to look at instead of my mug.
I'm so filthy sick right now.
Mouth breather.
What's up? I sleep with my mouth open. Oh, cool.
We're in the shop, and I am not even in the thing.
Yeah, you are. The thing's like this big.
It's pretty, yeah.
The camera angle.
Yeah.
Is this big?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're in the shop, and today we're going to be doing a Torq locker, amongst some other things. Trevor from DirtyLife.ca sent us out some stuff, so what we're going to be doing is, everything's partially torn down now for a lot of other reasons. There's going to be a few videos on what's going on with that. But for today, we're going to continue taking out the front diff and installing a Torq locker and getting rid of the Visco, and what I think about that. So we'll get into that.
I have no words to add.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
My wife, everyone. The shop's a little different since the last time you've seen it, but the bike is exactly where I left it. It's been very busy on our end. We're doing all sorts of little projects, but we're making sure you guys have ample amounts of videos to watch if you so choose. Like we said today, hello,
I'm
wife.
holding it to sneeze.
Give her. Give her.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot.
Man.
We're seeing a box of stuff here, a whole lot of disassembly there, a lineup of all sorts of different parts, a little bit of lifeblood, parts and parts. But for now, just because of the way things worked out, I'm gonna pull off these tie rods and then rip that diff out of there, do a little bit of deep cleaning because stuff gets stuck in all sorts of places. I got a whole pile of dirt just about everywhere. We're gonna start by draining this, taking out some bolts, and then cutting these clamps off. I can't actually assemble today because I'm missing a few things that I have to have before I put it back in. Luckily my local Can-Am dealer has got everything on order, and they're pretty good about it. But if you see us randomly change shirts on a whole other different day, then you know, that's what happened. So we're tackling this bit by bit. Lots of little pieces going on. So what basically happened is I knew I wanted to do the Torq locker. Trevor sent that out a while ago. But while I was in there, I figured, why not some of this and some of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, all sorts of stuff.
Some of this.
So I figured while I was in there, I would just do it all in one swing. But we have all sorts of other goodies and projects and things going on too at the same time. So I know we're good for videos.
Ooh.
Oh, I don't like being on camera. So I know we're good for videos while I have it tore down, so that's pretty cool. It's all about maintaining a little bit of consistency, and you guys like the 3-day schedule, so we're trying to pump them out while being reasonable at the same time and not just putting anything on the internet. So for now, what we're going to do is get started on ripping all that apart.
Oops. Looks like I'm recording.
Just doing what I do best. Tedious, slow, bolts.
You're just like Megan Fox in Transformers.
I'm dead inside. I'm just kidding.
In other news.
There's nothing better than working on a Can-Am.
Nothing better.
Nothing better.
Oh my god. rod.
It's just one of those, like, I usually skip this part because I think people get the idea of turning a bolt. Okay, so what I did was I pulled off the tie rods. It's a 19 and a 15 mil. You can rip those out pretty quick. To get this diff out, I'm going to take this bracket here. This holds the most forward side of the upper A-arms. Get that bracket out of the way, because from what I understand, this diff kind of slides a little bit forward, and then you can walk it out upwards and out from this side. So another thing we're going to have to prepare is this front shaft. These 4 clamps are going to have to be cut. So what I do is I find the crimp point and I cut it there, just to be careful about your boot so you don't cut that up. And I'm pretty sure someone's already typing a comment about how I said boot, a boot, Canada. I know. We don't actually say that. But we're going to cut these off, and then we should have everything out of the way in order to rip this diff out of here. And then we'll sling it up on the bench and get it prepped for the torque locker. So I got to the point where I took off the tie rods, I took off all the clamps, but realistically you don't have to take off the front 2 clamps near the diff. This shaft will slide forward towards the diff, and then you can just angle it up and away from the shaft that comes out of the engine. Everything else is unbolted. Even the vent tube on the other side I had to cut it. I could have taken a heat gun and just walked it off probably, but I've got plenty of length to sort that out afterwards. All the bolts are undone, and in this scenario, because I have the A-arms off, it's quite easy. I mean, it's a little finicky, of course, but it'll just walk right out of there. So once I got the shaft out of the way, everything just kind of unseated, and it just comes right out, no problem. Now, like I said, when you're doing this and you have A-arms in, it can be done. You just split the A-arms, and it's a little more annoying, but I know it can be done with A-arms in, especially from this side. It has to be this side. You've got a couple little brackets in the way when you get there if you're doing it with A-arms on, so just know that when you're sitting on the bike, the right-hand side is what you want to take it out from, of course. So we're going to move on to the bench and get on with it. So there she is, wide open. I just covered up the shaft there because I'm going to be cleaning a lot of this out, and I don't want to have to clean dirt out of that grease point. But I'm going to clean all this out at the same time as I've already got this drained, ready to go. We're going to split that case pretty soon. We have some fantastic instructions here from Torque Locker, and they actually include an installation video. So I think it's redundant for me to do an installation video, but we're going to watch the process here anyway. I'm going to get you set up, but what I did want to talk about is Visco lock, why I'm here. This is incredibly angled, but the big point is Visco lock, the honest truth is I personally believe that there's nothing wrong with the Visco lock. It will let you down. It depends on the kind of rider you are. Now, you know, if you just generally need your 4x4, you're an off-roader, but you're not big on the huge skeg and mud and plowing and that kind of thing, the Visco is going to do just fine. My personal belief is that the 4x4 with the Visco lock lets you down like it's the 1%. So my Visco lock definitely let me down in some of the more challenging stuff that I wanted to do where one tire won't engage. But the honest truth is, if you know how to engage the Visco, if you don't just pin it right off the get-go, you get it engaged and go, you'll be fine. That being said, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. So I have a chance to put a torque locker in. The way the ratcheting style locker that they developed, you can still turn a little bit, but don't get me wrong, there's difficulties with that. Some of the cons would be you'll hear the ratcheting, it'll feel different. The 4x4 is very rugged and straightforward stuff. So when you're riding, it may seem extra stiff or a little harder to operate, but when it comes down to the brass tacks in your 4x4, this torque locker is just going to do an ultimate job. There's no better out there as far as what you can do in the aftermarket for Can-Am. There's a couple different companies doing it different ways. I've seen Torq Locker work, I've seen it operate, and it's fantastic. So for me, it's worth it. For another scenario would be the Visco can fail, and I've seen it time and time again after a couple rides or some heavy abuse, the Visco can fail. So what I would suggest in that scenario is if your Visco failed, just delete it and do a Torq Locker. And while you're in there, obviously do some bearings and seals like I'll be doing, because you're already in there. Why wouldn't you? It's cheap. It's just general maintenance stuff. So there's a couple ways to go about doing a Torq Locker. If you're the extreme tight, you're doing the skeg, you're doing the mud, you're doing the heavy plowing. I've actually had Visco fail me plowing. In one of my plow videos, you can see the 4x4 not engage when I was stuck. So you get this 3-wheel drive scenario. So for me, it's worth it in a lot of different ways. I like to be prepared for all scenarios. Every once in a while, I get into some pretty nasty stuff, so that's why I'm doing it. And of course, I can't leave anything alone. There's actually nothing wrong with my Visco. There's nothing wrong with my front diff. There's no reason for me to be digging into any of this, of course, but I have an opportunity with Dirty Life to not only try a few things and share what I've learned, but I I just have to modify things. It's just the way I work. And I'm excited to see the results. I've seen it on other people's bikes, but I'd like to experience it for myself. So I get a lot of questions. So I find I have found myself in a position where I would like to know these things so I can make suggestions to people about what's what and what's great. So I'm pretty excited to get into this. But like I said, Torq Locker already has a fantastic installation video. What I'll do is include that. There's no point in me doing that also. But of course, you guys always love your shop videos with me, and I have no problem with that. I'd love to share that with you guys. So I'm going to dig into this and see what I learn about the installation process. Maybe there's a trick or something that I could let you guys in on as I learn, or maybe it's just very straightforward and easy going. So anyway, we're going to dig into this, and if you want to follow along. But like I said, I'm going to link down below the installation video from Torq Locker, and honestly, you can search it up probably pretty easy. I don't want to be redundant, but hey, here we are. So let's get into it. One thing I've learned in my time being a mechanic is doing yourself a favor for the future. A lot of mechanics find themselves pretty frustrated at their past selves. So sometimes helping yourself out for the future is the best way to look at it. One of those things that you can do is making sure everything's marked. I know that this thing basically goes together in one way, but you'll see where it comes into play more so later. And having a good paint marker is definitely something you want to keep in mind. And I mark everything so that when the time comes for reassembly, it's obvious. There's no possible mistakes. Of course, mistakes can still happen. On anything that I do, I like to leave 2 marks. There's some scenarios where only 1 mark won't help you, but 2 marks you can't screw up. Now, that's just one of those things that when you're in reassembly, you might forget, especially in this scenario where I might be working on this project over a couple of days, or there might be a week in between. When you go to reassemble, you left yourself little notes, little tidbits that you can put back together. There it is. Oh, I remember that. Or some things need to be clocked a certain way. Some things need to be recognized, or maybe there's a torque value, right? So let's say Torq Locker wants this bolt at 1 billion foot-pounds. Well, you got to make sure that you either follow an order. So you mark the ones that you've done, and you mark it again with a different paint color to mark the ones that you are for sure finished and they're torqued to the value that's specified. So it's just a little tip. Something I like to think about is constantly making sure the redundancies are covered. All the little things are covered. So it's just one thing I do. And even in the simple things where something goes together one way, it speeds up time. You don't have to double check. You don't have to get into instructions. You don't have to find a manual. You just, oh yeah, I'm sure this is the way it goes, and you can just skip those steps. So anyway, fun tip for you. So for now, I'm gonna start splitting the case here, and it's just a bunch of Torqs. What size was it? I got a T40. We're gonna start splitting that and lift this case off and see what we got going on. All right, split that. That's all good to go. Certainly, everything looks pretty standard here. Everything looks pretty healthy. I don't see any shavings or anything. I've definitely got some remnants of older oils and stuff like that. Not a big deal. Everything looks really clean so far. I'm gonna break into the destructions now, because as far as this is standard, the Visco side I've never actually played in. I've seen plenty of videos on them and how they work long before I even bought the bike, but we're going to be deleting the Visco on the other side, so that's what they want, and I'll get into those destructions and find out what's going on there and see what they want to do here. But I'm actually really happy with a lot of the condition in here. One of the things my generation of Outlander is known for is differentials, especially the rear more than the front, but everything's well coated and very happy, and no obvious dings so far. I can definitely see where a little bit of heat's been involved, but it's all looking pretty good. It stinks. That's gear oil for you. But yeah, we'll keep going at it. So honestly, this is like the easiest installation ever. I was expecting a little more of a fight, but the honest truth is, once you have this whole carrier out, all I did was take the 2 snap rings off the guide pin, pull the pin out, you just start rotating the spider gears that are here, and all I did was they just fell out. You make sure you have all your little shims and everything with it out of it. This installation uses none of the stock shims that way, so your top and lower spiders will have it, and then these little guys here, so make sure that's all out. And then you just put your bottom in, that next piece there, and then rotate it, and these top 2 will fit right in, no problem. Super easy. Once you have that, you just put the springs in to make sure they're seated. I put a little bit of grease, just ever so much, a little bit of grease, and everything works out quite well that way. We do have to check a clearance. There's an acceptable clearance in your installation guide that goes here and here. Just make sure you've got it. I think it's 1.5 to 1.8 or whatever. So check that clearance in there. And we're going to move on to deleting the Visco. So when it comes to the deletion, is that a word? I don't know. Deleting the Visco lock, you remove the ring gear off the unit, which is a bunch of these Allen head bolts. They are blue Loctited. Just make sure you have a really good seat for your 6mm Allen in there, and be careful not to strip these. Now you have another Allen set screw in here, and these are red Loctited. They advise you to put some heat to it. If you know anything about red Loctite, definitely put some heat to it. If you strip these, in which it looks like it's really easy to do, you're pretty well screwed. So we're going to heat these up. You don't need anything crazy. You don't need acetylene or whatever. Just a little bit of propane. Gum up the red Loctite and then try removing it. Just be prepared so while it's nice and warm to remove that. Once we get inside there, we're going to have everything we need to remove the Visco side of business, which is exactly what we want. They recommend it for people who are getting serious, and honestly, if you're getting a Torq locker, just delete it. The one thing you need to know is that you can't put your Visco back in, right? You'll need another set of Visco pieces, so not a big deal. Let's get into that. So now we've got the 2 pieces separated. Heating up those 2 little nuts was perfect. Be very careful about that. You really don't want to screw that up. So once you have those out, the 2 pieces come out, and what you see here is all of your clutches. A lot of people don't even know how this works, but essentially you have a friction disc and a steel disc, This is really big in my trade as heavy equipment. You'll see this in brakes and different clutches, all sorts of different things. So it's just a match set. So you have a friction material and then your steel set, and then they alternate, and they're all splined, of course, to make it all work. And in here you have your oil that actually expands these clutches or heats up and pushes them out, or in some applications it's just applied pressure or a brake pedal or something like that. So we got to remove all of those, and they're all slotted in here. Get all those out, chuck them out. Don't need those. Torque locker's going to do its job now. Then we got to remove the gear, and then we have to remove the actual seal here. But once all that's back out, we literally reassemble, follow Torque specs, make sure everything's lined up with the marks that I put at the beginning, and then basically reinstall. You want to make sure everything's reasonably lubricated and clean when you put it back together, and then it's just a matter of reassembly. So pretty excited about that, and we're going to find out how the Torque locker works. So I'm going to get digging into this. The honest truth is this has been incredibly simple. I don't think you need to be overly mechanically inclined. You just have to have a decent head on your shoulders to think about it. The actual installation and delete, you're probably looking at like 10 minutes of work, especially if you follow the heat steps and just making sure you're taking your time. The actual Torque locker itself takes like, 3 minutes max. Like, it's not overly complicated. It's a very good design. It's something that's been around for a very long time. It may be newer to ATVs and stuff like that just because of application. But they're in Jeeps and Land Cruisers and whatever. They're all over the place. So that's pretty cool stuff. So what we're gonna do is just continue on with this. Like I said, if you're looking for more details, you're welcome to ask me if you'd like. But the honest truth is there's far better videos to really dig deep into this stuff from Torque Locker, so that's pretty cool. I just wanted to show you how it went for me. Some of you's like that, so yeah, keep ripping into her. There she is, folks. So the delete process was very, very easy. So the Visco is deleted on both sides. Then I just started putting it back together the way it's supposed to. Torque locker's already in it, of course. I lined up my marks. Everything's happy. I have everything torqued down to 27 foot-pounds like it wanted. The set screws are in. Everything's Loctited. A little bit of grease to help it settle in. And now we just start putting it back in the case with a little bit of gear oil, of course, to help it out, make sure it's nice and clean. The first few minutes of this running with new gear oil and everything, it's going to have to douse everything, so I want to make sure it's already preemptively oiled. It's a good practice to have. While I have the case separated, I'm actually going to do all the seals because I'm already here. Why wouldn't I? And it's just a matter of putting it all back together in the case, which is awesome. So everything went really well. Installation is exactly as they said, and really happy with it so far. So now it's just a matter of putting it all back together, back in the machine, and test it. That won't happen today because of the nature of the other upgrades I have to do, but at least I'll have it back inside, and it'll be good to go. So in the future, what I'll do is I'll go for a first ride with all these modifications done and talk about some of these things. So really happy with that. Like I said, again, this wasn't meant to be a installation guide. If there was any tricks or anything that happened that I learned that I could probably help you with, you guys, I would say it. But honestly, it's very straightforward, very, very simple. The only thing they stress is making sure everything's nice and clean, torqued down. You have to check the gap in here, so there's an accepted tolerance. What does it want here? I checked it out. Between 0.15 and 0.185 inches, and I had 0.17, which is the ideal center gap. So that's pretty cool. So everything checks out so far, and we'll slap it back in. I appreciate you guys watching. Again, there's a link down below if you want to see the full installation guide from Torq Locker themselves. And yeah, so there we go. We're going to be officially Torq locked, real 4-wheel drive. So all of you other brand riders can get off my back now. So again, thanks Dirty Life for sending out the Torq Locker. Very, very cool of you. If you guys want one of these, of course, www.dirtylife.ca. You can get whatever you need. So subscribe, like, do your thing. Thanks for watching.